The elections of Tuesday, November the 4th were historic, followed closely not just by Americans in places that voted, but by Americans wherever they lived, and by the world. I happen to know that the results of the election were felt across the border, 341 miles north of New York City in Toronto, the city in which I grew up. My family, including my 91-year-old father, was watching, and I know what they were thinking. They were thinking about a cold March night 44 years ago, election night in Ontario in 1981. I'm just 11 years old. It's just the two of us in the car, my father and me, finally off our feet after a long day of bus stops and leafleting. We're driving back to the campaign office in the district that another party has held for decades. The very notion that my 5'3" brown immigrant Muslim father of Indian origin by way of South Africa and Kenya would even run for office was improbable. The idea that he could be elected there was unthinkable. Toronto in 1981 was not the cosmopolitan place it is today. Immigrants had scarcely been elected anywhere in Canada, especially to major office. So back to that night. The polls are closed, but we're still 10 minutes out from the campaign headquarters. No real rush, we thought. My father reaches over and turns on the radio at the top of the hour. The polls have closed across Ontario, the announcer reads. It's too early to tell who will form the government tonight. A beat. Then the disembodied voice continues. We can, however, declare Dennis Timbrell the winner in the district of Don Mills, Toronto. And there it was, the call. One I would learn to make years later as a journalist covering elections. It's exactly 8:01 p.m., amazingly fast. The only problem is that Dennis Timbrell, the guy who won, isn't my father. My father is Murad Velshi, the man driving the car, the man who just suffered the swiftest, most definitive loss of the entire election. 11-year-old me glances left from the passenger seat, expecting anger or disbelief. Instead, I see calm. The announcer keeps talking about projections and incumbents. I'm still processing how a race can be over the minute the polls close, how anyone can know anything that fast. I didn't understand exit polling or safe seat arithmetic, or that my father was literally running against the safest incumbent in the entire election. I blurt out, I can't believe we lost. He looks at me, grins. He actually grins. Of course we lost, he says. We were never going to win. I stare at him, confused. What was this all about then? He responds with the sentence that became my civics catechism. We ran because we could. Sensing my heartbreak, he explained, I stood for what I believed in, he said. People had a chance to vote for me, and more people chose to vote for the other guy. And finally, the words that still steady me. It's okay. Now that I've lost, our life goes on. We don't get arrested. We don't get shunned. Nothing bad happens. Minutes later, we pull into the campaign office, and this is the part that really fries my already overloaded 11-year-old brain. People are clapping, and they're cheering. There are no tears. I'm the only one acting like it's a funeral. Everyone else is acting like we've just proved something, that you can move your party from third place in the last election to second place this time around and call it progress. That there's dignity in standing up so people can choose, even if they don't choose you, even if they aren't ready for you. Yet, in that car, with the radio still humming, my father taught me that in a free society, one in which he did not have the privilege of growing up, losing is simply practice for eventual victory. It's the price of admission for a second chance. 6 years later, in 1987, we got that second chance. The ground in Toronto had shifted. The long-term incumbent had retired. The complexion of the city had changed. And the coalition we'd been building in church basements, in Jamaat Khanas, in Gurdwaras, in temples, in living rooms, was ready. This time we had a little more money for a real campaign and a little more name recognition and a lot more strategy. We moved into a vacant office, a low-slung 3-room space in the middle of the parking lot of a small outdoor shopping center, right in the heart of the community that we hoped to mobilize. By the time we'd unpacked our stuff, every centimeter was spoken for. Room 1 became the phone bank, mismatched chairs around folding tables, a tangle of cords feeding big, scuffed desk phones, coffee rings on clipboards, a metal cash tin for petty expenses, call sheets sorted by poll number and time of day. Room 2 was a map room, a district map taped edge to edge, streets highlighted in neon, masking tape grids for canvas turfs, push pins, a whiteboard labeled rides, poll captains, language. Room 3 was triple duty. It was a small kitchen and a food staging area because it was an immigrant campaign, so there was always food. There was a strategy room, insofar as we had a strategy, and a volunteer intake room. It had a dented electric kettle, a paper cups, stack of paper cups, food boxes, sharing pastries from a neighborhood seniors club, a dot matrix printer chewing through tractor-fed paper. The soundtrack was the fluorescent buzz of the lights, a box fan rattling in the doorway, and the rise and fall of a dozen languages: English, Gujarati, Urdu, Punjabi, Tagalog, Italian, Portuguese, Polish, moving in and out of the same project. On the walls, taped scripts for first contact with a voter, persuasion, and get out the vote, a shift board for bus stop leafleting at one of the major intersections in the district, a ride list for voters and volunteers who lived in the towns scattered across the urban district, a nightly checklist of things to do. It wasn't alchemy, it was arithmetic. Rides offered, doors knocked, calls returned, politics as logistics, democracy as labor. And then came election night in 1987. This time, we weren't in the car when the polls closed. We were all at the campaign office. The returns started flowing in from our volunteers, phoning in unofficial results from the polling places they were at. On the TV, all of Toronto began to paint itself liberal red. We waited and waited, because you never know when they're going to call your race, until a roar went up from the main room. By the time I shouldered through to the small boxy TV, it was already over. They had called our race and moved on. This time, we won. We cried, all of us. Being elected to the Ontario legislature was modest in the grand political scheme of things, but to the people in that room that night, it was monumental. It was everything, because at the end of a long walk to freedom and democracy, a big and important door had opened. September 10th, 1987 was my father's swearing in. The chamber at the legislature was packed, 3 generations of my family alive and present. One man not there, my pioneering grandfather, who had started this movement for political change in our family back in 1907. My father placed his hand on a Quran, another first, and became the first Muslim and the first South Asian elected to the Ontario legislature. Institutions change when the people inside them change, and when those people, like my father, remember the people who sent them to office. That is the political arc of my family, although it gets better, because ultimately both my mother and my sister would run for office and become prominent in civil society. But as I watched Zoran Mamdani on Tuesday night, I thought of a more personal arc, that of a small immigrant Muslim boy on ice skates that I could never quite use. Because in junior high in Toronto, the school hockey rink doubled as the playground, but it was a hockey rink, and my immigrant parents, doing their best, inadvertently bought me figure skates from a secondhand store. Try showing up to a rink in a storied hockey town in figure skates. I did it once. That was it. That's why I never played hockey again. There's a kind of an ache to which you become accustomed when you're near the center of a culture but not in it. The simultaneous proximity and exclusion can make you bitter. It can also make you resilient. It can make you try harder. You notice frictions that are small to others but big to you. Those frictions teach you to do a bit of extra work, to get closer to the center of things. They teach you that if the space doesn't fit, you might have to make it bigger, and more importantly, make room for others once you do, because there is room for everyone. Eventually, I crossed another border into a city that would claim me and that I would come to claim back. My official start date as a reporter in New York City was Monday, September 10th, 2001. Paperwork snarls delayed my entry, and when the skies closed on the morning of September 11th, I was trying to get from Toronto to New York City under attack. There were no planes flying. There were no cars available to rent. I didn't have a car. I had sold it in anticipation of moving. I did have a motorcycle that I was never planning to use again, a 650cc Honda Hawk, and some kind people at the U.S. consulate in Toronto facilitated this young immigrant crossing the border at Niagara Falls with nothing more than a thermal faxed copy of a visa. Hours after the worst terror attack on American soil, a border agent at Niagara Falls stamped my visa, and I rode my motorcycle south for hours, cold, my visor fogging, my hands numb, stopping every 45 minutes for gas and coffee, and to stop shaking. By night, the Manhattan skyline appeared, smoke and the orange glow of burning fires hanging on the horizon like a bruise. I crossed the George Washington Bridge into a city filled with posters of the faces of the missing. I was not a native New Yorker. I arrived in the shadow of burning towers and entered a society that was filled with unprocessed suspicion and grief. For obvious reasons, I didn't play up the Muslim part. Years later, in a courtroom in downtown Manhattan, right near where ICE agents today snatch and deport migrants who lawfully attend their scheduled hearings, I sat for my own oath of citizenship. We had surrendered our phones at the door, so I picked up the only reading material in reach, and as the ceremony idled, I read my brand new pocket Constitution, start to finish, 3 times. In my hands, a document written by men capable of heinous things, who did some heinous things themselves, yet they crafted a set of ideals with the aspiration to create a more perfect union, inclusive in ways even they could not imagine at the time. A union in which all could vote and all could run for office. When I swore my oath of citizenship, I meant it. Tread the arcs together, losing and learning, winning and serving, arriving and belonging. You get the same lesson. Democracy is not a miracle. It's muscle memory. You run because you can, especially when they tell you that you can't. You celebrate the shift from third place to second place because democracy is built and sustained on the margins. You build coalitions that look like the place you want to live. You measure progress in rides offers, doors knocked, ballots cast. You honor loss without fear, victory without swagger, and office without arrogance. And you, and at least I, remember the car radio at 8:01 p.m., a small boy, an unflappable father, a radio call that was not about us. We ran because we could. In a free country, losing isn't fatal. It's practice. It's permission to try again. That's how small acts of courage combine to become the kind of history that outlives us, because democracy is not passed down through bloodlines. It's built over and over by people who show up even when the odds say they shouldn't. That's how a Muslim immigrant of Indian origin whose family made a stop in Africa, like mine, ends up not as an outsider in the story of democracy, but as proof of what democracy can still become. Joining me now is the Democratic Tennessee State Representative Justin Jones. Representative Jones, great to see you. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Good to see you, brother.
I wanted to talk to you about this because I think there were so many narratives to take away from Tuesday night about people really showing up, really taking the assignment, fighting for democracy and fighting for the things that really matter to them. But there was something else there. There was a story, including that of Zohran Mamdani, of somebody who was an outsider whose name nobody knew 6 months ago, who is starting, like you, to look like, generational political beings. And I wanted to talk to you about this whole idea of moving from the outside into the center.
Definitely. Well, first I got to say your piece, brother, just spoke life to me this morning and gave me hope and spoke to something that I've been kind of working through, and just talking about how democracy is built at the margins, and how, your dad talked about how there's dignity in standing up, even if people are not ready yet. Because when, Mamdani started, people were not ready yet. It was like he was polling less than 5%, but he built the momentum and gave people hope of what this nation ought to be and what it can be. And so I think what we're seeing in my state, when I saw the news, I said, Tennessee's not there yet. The South's not there yet. But seeing this movement that you're lifting up that says that we have the power and the necessity to try and offer an alternative vision of what this nation can be, not just fight against Trump, but what is something better to come out of this madness right now. That's the hope. And so that's, the piece just left me in tears when I was hearing you, brother. So I just wanted to share that and just and talk about the time right now that we're in, we're in a politics so much of trauma, but we're offering now, Tuesday gave us for the first time a politics of possibility, a politics of redemption, of redeeming the soul of who America can be, and fighting for a true multiracial democracy, reconstructing something better than what we had seen even before Trump, and what's going to be long lasting after that man is ousted from office, and we and our children inherit hopefully a better world than this one.
So this was the key part, that maybe not ready yet, right? You're in the South. You're in a state that has a Republican supermajority in the legislature. They tried to throw you out of the legislature. Your people sent you back to the legislature. And maybe one day it'll be a quaint story for your children and grandchildren to tell. But this is your work right now. You are laying the groundwork for when Tennessee is ready for something different.
I mean, every day I walk into work prepared to lose the electoral vote. We're in the super minority. And they say, why do you speak up? So why do you offer dissent? And then I think really it's kind of that lesson of what your dad was saying. And I'm just so moved by that, because 2 weeks ago I lost my dad. So there's just a lot of emotion from hearing that. But what I say every time I walk to the Capitol is that a dissent is a message to the future. The people may not be ready right now, but when our children read in the books that there was this asinine policies eroding their rights, there were people who fought back and who said, we may not have the power, quote unquote, right now, but we love you and we'll use every tool at our disposal to fight for a better future for you. And so even when I vote in the legislature, I always write out my dissents because I want to send them as a love letter to the next generation to say, this is where we stood. This is why we stood. And we hope that by the time you read this, by the time you are reading this in the history books, you knew that we were laying the groundwork for you to inherit this victory. And I think that's what the power is. And there was another part you said in your piece about how institutions change when the people inside them change, when they remember who sent them there. Those are the type of people we need to bring into office. And when I think about who sent me here, it's not just the people who can vote, but it's the children who come to my office,
right,
who write me letters and draw pictures that I hang on my office door. That's who sent me to the Capitol, and that's who I fight for every day.
I'm sorry for the loss of your father, but he must have been awful proud to see the change that you and people like you, and there are, right? People tell me there's no young people, no interesting people who are prepared to break the glass, and I point to you. I said, but there are. There are people who are prepared to do this. And when you show yourself to your constituents, and this happened, you got to test this whole thing when they tried to throw you out of the legislature. It matters when there's someone for people to vote for, when there's someone to say, I too am on this journey with Brother Jones.
I mean, even when I got in, seeing your dad serve at the regional legislative level, like somebody like me, I'm the first non-white member to represent my district. Someone who comes in with earrings and long hair who's told that you don't belong here. You don't look like you are a legislator. I said, well, this is what a legislator looks like. And I remember my first week there, they were trying to tell us, you have to decide, are you going to be an activist or a legislator? I said, we represent a new model of being a movement legislator, of being both, because we have to be. That's what our people sent me there. When I got expelled, the people of my district turned out by the thousands because they knew that when I got elected, I was not coming to be part of the good old boys club or to be accepted by a system that was never meant for my ancestors or meant for me, but to build a new system, to break down the door and hold it open and say, okay, now let's elect other people. We just elected, like the mother who lost her son to gun violence, the first Latina member. And now I'm recruiting young people to say, we're going to oust these folks who've been here longer than I've been alive, who don't represent the politics of a new South, but who represent the politics of the dead, dying South that is racist and is built in a Southern apartheid system. And so, we represent a new vision, and that's what terrifies them. That's why they kicked us out. But hey, we're still here. And the success is, like you said, democracy is built in labor, and it's arithmetic. And so now the success is to say, I don't want to just sit here on my laurels, say I made it, but how do we get other people? I don't want to be the youngest black lawmaker in Tennessee. I want to have other young black lawmakers run and take power and to say that we represent a new possibility, and then to continue that lineage. And hopefully that chamber will change, and we'll have people who actually remember the people who sent them there in the first place.
I think that term you just used, you're a movement legislature, an activist who became a legislator, a movement legislator. What a remarkable thing, because the distance now between you and the millions of people who came out to vote on Tuesday and the 7 million people who went to No Kings rallies is narrower, right? If you're a movement legislator, you're the same as the people who are out at those rallies. You're the same as the people who are voting for a better future for themselves and a more democratic future.
I mean, I think it shows that you can be a regular person and step into it. It takes away that facade, the falsehoods of power, the veil, I should say, that makes it seem like it's out of touch, out of reach. But it says, no, I'm a lawmaker who's going to stand with my constituents in the street, because even when I walk in the Capitol, the same troopers who open the door now and I say, welcome, representative, to your office, just 4 years ago, were arresting me, taking me to jail, fighting for racial justice, fighting to remove a KKK statue from our state capitol. And now the dynamics have changed, and I can question these agents and say, are you upholding the constitutional rights of Tennesseans, of people, to make sure that their rights are respected, to file legislation to ensure that my constituents are not brutalized and attacked when they're exercising their First Amendment rights? And so it shifted the dynamic there. And I think, there are people who are going to these protests who are questioning, am I ready? Am I the right person to run? Don't wait for permission. Yes, you are. If you have any imposter syndrome, watch one session of Congress and you'll see the folks leading our government. Watch one session of our legislature and you are ready. You have the expertise you need. You are proximate to the pain, so you should be proximate to the power. It's your time now. It's time to bust down these doors. And Tuesday gave us that open the gate, the floodgates, to say, we get ready because here we come, and you better move on over, or we'll move on over you, because we're moving on to build a better nation, a better South, and to make this nation rise anew. It's time to rise anew, and it's our time now.
You're proximate to the pain, so you should be proximate to the power. Brother Jones, it is great to have you here. Thank you for sharing this time with me. Justin Jones is representative, Tennessee State Representative. All right, coming up, the Senate will be in session in the next hour as the longest ever government shutdown drags on. Senator Ed Markey, the Democrat of Massachusetts, joins me next with the latest updates from Capitol Hill, including how newly emboldened Democrats are flexing their power at the negotiating table. The United States Senate takes the floor at noon today with no votes currently scheduled. Meanwhile, the longest government shutdown in history drags on. On Friday, Senate Democrats offered a deal to reopen the government in exchange for Republicans agreeing to extend health care subsidies just for 1 year and to create a bipartisan committee to negotiate future health reforms. The Republican Senate Majority Leader John Thune rejected it outright and insisted that Affordable Care Act subsidy extensions can only be negotiated after the government reopens. Meanwhile, it's going to be a difficult weekend for SNAP recipients. The Supreme Court late last night granted the Trump administration's request to immediately pause a federal judge's ruling that required it to fully fund SNAP food assistance for the month of November, pending an appeal. Instead, it allowed it to continue with planned partial SNAP payments for the month. Just remember, by the way, SNAP payments for an individual are somewhere between $6 and $10 a day. Just that's what we're talking about. Joining me now is the Democratic Senator of Massachusetts, Senator Ed Markey. He serves on many committees, including as ranking member of the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee. Senator Markey, great to see you again. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Great to see you.
I just want to, first of all, get rid of this John Thune idea that can't negotiate things until the shutdown ends. That's just his opinion. There's no prohibition from any of you negotiating anything during a government shutdown.
Exactly. And they did not negotiate with us when they repealed the IRA in July. They did not negotiate with us when they cut Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act and the NIH funding and all of those other programs in July. No negotiation whatsoever. And they did not negotiate with us when they rescinded the funding for PBS. They rescinded the funding for USAID. And they're saying right now, trust us. We'll negotiate with you on the health care of 22 million Americans after you reopen the government. Well, there's an old saying, there's no educational benefit to the second kick of a mule. Right. We already learned this lesson. They don't come to the negotiating table unless they absolutely have to. The old humorist Oscar Levant, he used to say, and this would refer to the Republicans, we'll double cross that bridge when we get to it.
Right.
Well, they can come to the table. They should come to the table. We'll resolve this issue to protect the 22 million Americans and their health care as these families start to prepare for Thanksgiving dinner. And their conversation is going to be about their lost health care. The Republicans, they're going to keep their health insurance. And so all we're saying to the Republicans is extend it for 1 year.
Yep.
Then let's have the negotiation. But we can't allow for you to be trusted, to be honest with you, with the health care of so many people across our country.
So for people who read some articles yesterday, I noticed that it felt like there was a little bit of a failure in some of the journalism around this, which framed the 1 year proposal by Chuck Schumer as a backtrack, as a concession. Here's my read. Everybody saw what happened on Tuesday night. Democrats know this is a winning issue for Democrats, that if Republicans want to win in midterm elections on the basis of cutting health insurance premiums or cutting subsidies to health insurance premiums for 22 million people, they'll simply lose in the midterm elections.
Well, people came out in complete and total amazement to political experts, to pollsters. The voters were angry. The voters are afraid. They're afraid for what's happening to our country. They're afraid for what's happening to their own families. 22 million people, their health care, 42 million Americans, the SNAP benefit, cuts to research in Alzheimer's and cancer and diabetes. They're afraid. And they're angry about what is happening to them. And it just completely and totally defied all of expert expectation of what was about to happen. And it happened, yes, in New York City, but in New Jersey, in Virginia, in Mississippi, in Georgia. It happened all across the country. Yep. And they're saying to the Republicans, go back to the table, sit down, work on the issues that affect our families. Inflation is out of control for us at our kitchen table. Healthcare, electricity, food, clothing, all of it is skyrocketing, and the Republicans still refuse to come to the negotiating table.
So let me ask you this. Every time I hear about the SNAP benefit cuts, my mind goes to the fact that every couple of days we hear from the Secretary of Defense that they've bombed they've shut down another boat in Venezuela. We're amassing 10,000 troops. We've got F-35s there. We've got a battle group going versus $6 to $10 a day per person for food. There's nobody I've met in America who knows or thinks that we should have a war with Venezuela right now. This is crazy. Apparently this government can find money to spend when they've got certain priorities, but poor people and hungry people are not their priority.
It's billions of dollars for Argentina, hundreds of millions for an illegal pseudo war, which they're now conducting against Venezuela, a threat to depose the president of Venezuela. That's what the president did a couple of weeks ago. All of this without congressional authorization. It's in the Constitution. Only the Congress can declare war. We passed the War Powers Act. Only the Congress can declare a war upon another country. But at the same time, they're ignoring the fact that an individual in our country only gets $6 a day on SNAP. It's $4.79 for a gallon of milk at the Stop and Shop. That individual only gets $6 a day, and they're denying that person that funding. And for the Affordable Care Act and their premium tax credits, I talked last week to Jeff from Natick. His stage 4 cancer drugs, $30,000 a year he pays right now. If these tax subsidies expire, his bill's going to be $300,000 a year for the drugs. He doesn't have $300,000 a year, and he's worried. And there are 22 million other American families who are going to lose their coverage or see skyrocketing prices that make it unaffordable for them. That's what we should be talking about right now, not Venezuela, not invading Greenland or Canada or Venezuela. We should come back to the American kitchen table, to the dining room table, and talk about the issues they're talking about and the concerns that they registered on Tuesday night.
And one of those things, and we're going to see what the Supreme Court does on this, is these tariffs, right? I mean, Donald Trump said he wanted to he ran on affordability, said he was going to bring prices down, and then he did the thing that was going to do the opposite, is imposing these tariffs. There have been several court challenges. It's now worked its way up to the Supreme Court. Interestingly enough, the conservative Supreme Court justices, at least two of them, Gorsuch and Coney Barrett, seem skeptical that Trump has the right to impose the tariffs the way he did.
Exactly. And this is a case brought by the small businesses of the United States. There's one small business in America for every 10 Americans. And 97% of all trade in the United States is conducted by small businesses. 97%. And right now, they are having a tax imposed upon them by the Trump administration, which is illegal. I went to the Supreme Court case. I sat there and listened to the argument of Donald Trump's Solicitor General, and you could see these Republican-appointed justices, their eyebrows were so arched they were hitting the ceiling as Trump's lawyer was trying to explain why it's legal for him to impose taxes. No, the Constitution makes it very clear. The Congress has the authority to impose taxes. In fact, 250 years ago in Massachusetts, in Lexington and Concord, a revolution began. No taxation without representation.
Right.
We want a House. We want a Senate. We don't want King George deciding what the taxes are on tea or stamps. And today, King Donald thinks that he has that power. Yep. And the Supreme Court, it was very clear, is very skeptical about this power that Trump is seeking to aggregate to himself under a very dubious argument that Congress gave away its constitutional right to tax. And I think he's ready to get his legal butt kicked in the next several weeks by the Supreme Court.
Senator, good to see you again. Thank you for joining us this morning. Democratic Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts. All right, coming up, it's being called the biggest surge in energy costs since the invention of air conditioning. And even if you don't actively participate in it, it's on your cell phone right now. I'll explain why nationwide utility costs are skyrocketing and why you're being expected to pick up the tab. More Velshi after this. All right, we take a bit of a turn here. This is a topic we don't really talk about all that much. Artificial intelligence, or AI. I mean, we don't talk about it on the show. You probably talk about it in your lives all the time. AI is booming, and with that boom comes a hidden cost. AI uses an unprecedented amount of electricity. Now, to put that into perspective, ChatGPT, which is a commonly used AI tool, you might have it on your phone, it uses nearly 10 times more electricity to process a request, a query, than a single Google search would. You might use them interchangeably, but AI is much more complex. It requires constant computations, immense processing power, and vast amount of memory and cooling. All of that eats up electricity and is being fueled by massive data centers that consume energy on a scale that Columbia University says rivals entire cities. And that surge in energy demand has been driving power costs higher and in turn driving utility bills up for all of us. In the past 5 years alone, utility prices, now it's not all AI, but let me just try and set this up for you. Utility prices have skyrocketed by 267% in regions dominated by data centers, including states like Virginia, New Jersey, where the cost of electricity hit record highs. Virginia alone has more than 660 data centers, far more than any state. That's how AI is processed at these massive data centers. It's not some little server in a room somewhere. So the promise to rein in those high utility prices actually helped Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill win their races in Virginia and New Jersey this week.
I'm going to declare a state of emergency on day one to drive down your utility costs.
But it's not just Virginia and New Jersey feeling the pain. Utility prices have been surging across the country. Missouri saw the largest increase this year, with costs rising more than 38%. North Dakota was next, costs rising over 33%. Then New Jersey at 28% and Iowa at 27%. And the big, beautiful bill the Trump administration passed this summer is expected to make things worse. It provides over $1 billion in federal funding for unregulated AI expansion. Bloomberg Intelligence estimates that the AI industry will grow 42% by 2030, becoming a $1.3 trillion market. Some experts say this could be the biggest surge in energy demand since the invention of air conditioning. But unlike air conditioning, where you pay for the amount of energy you consume, with AI, you're paying for what tech companies use. Utility companies are now rapidly expanding power grids, and they're upgrading infrastructure to handle AI demand, costs that ultimately get passed down to consumers, which is why newly elected governors in Virginia and New Jersey are saying that they're going to do something about it. They're joining a coalition of governors demanding that PJM interconnection, which is the regional grid system that serves 13 states in the region, cut costs for consumers. An interconnection is an electrical grid system that optimizes energy usage between the states. They've even threatened to withdraw from PJM altogether if the company doesn't comply. Elsewhere, other states are taking action. In Oregon, lawmakers passed the Power Act to help utilities negotiate fairer deals with data centers and crypto miners. Crypto is another high-energy use computational thing. In Nevada, the Clean Transition Tariff forces Google to pay 100% of the costs for the new generation that it requires, directly protecting ratepayers from higher bills. In Pennsylvania, regulators are pushing for data centers to pay their fair share for grid usage instead of avoiding interconnection costs through co-location agreements that allow them to store data in spaces that are owned by a third party. Researchers at Columbia University say these approaches can, quote, shield low and middle income households from data center driven rate hikes. So not all hope is lost. But if the AI boom continues, and by the way, there's a lot of good that'll come from AI, but if it continues at this pace, there's still a lot more work to be done to make sure that that innovation doesn't come at the expense of everyone's power bill. Joining me now is Benjamin Lee. He's a professor at the Department of Electrical and Systems Engineering at the Department of Computational and Information Sciences at the University of Pennsylvania. His focus is on computer architecture, energy efficiency, and environmental sustainability. Thank you for being with us on the show this morning.
Wonderful to be here. Thanks so much.
So this is definitely a first for us. That explanation is not something that generally rolls off the tongue. It's not the normal politics that we're talking about. But we've now got this intersection of AI, which my viewers use whether they know it or not, and energy consumption. Give me your take on this.
Right. I think that's the first point to make, that most people are using AI whether they know it or not. It used to be that you had to consciously log into some website run by an AI developer and submit a request to an AI agent and they would come back with an answer for you. But what we are seeing increasingly is that most technology companies are embedding AI in their normal digital operations and services. So you mentioned search engines. It used to be that you could either do a Google search or you could access their AI model, but now they've bundled it together so that every search query gets routed to their AI. So you get these really easily understood summaries that are generated by AI at the top of the screen. So I think that there is increasing deployment of AI technologies behind the scenes, and that is definitely driving up these energy costs. Historically, we've been concerned about the energy costs related to training and building these models, processing these large data sets, learning a model that can deliver some new capability. We're increasingly seeing a transition from data processing and training to usage and inference,
right?
Deploying these models, getting more and more users access to these models, and that's driving up those energy costs.
Now, I want to be clear. There are things to do with AI. Someone might say, I don't use ChatGPT or Google Gemini or whatever the case is. There are use cases for AI that are amazing. They may help us find cures for diseases that it would take us 25 years of research to do. Like there might be, this is not a conversation about whether AI is good or bad, but it is a conversation about the fact that if this is the highest use of energy since the invention of air conditioning, and you do control your air conditioning in your house, you don't control the energy usage of AI. So what's the right model to think about here?
Right. So definitely starting with weighing the benefits and the costs. And I'd say that the industry, most of the research community is focused primarily on extracting and increasing those benefits. We actually don't know yet what compelling application AI will drive. We think we do, but in previous technology cycles, those compelling applications were the invention of the search engine or the invention of social media and the recommendation systems. And that those technologies and those applications have changed the way we live and work. We have not yet found an application for that, for AI yet at that scale. So what we see is most technology companies and most startups are expanding capability and exploring and trying to find that next so-called dominant application or killer application that will change the way we live and work. And until that is found, honestly, computer scientists, computer engineers don't know how to optimize energy efficiency because we have this moving target. We have a range of applications, a range of computations we could optimize. But if that's going to change in 6 months, asking thousands of engineers to go in and optimize energy efficiency is hard. So right now, we're very much on the benefits side of the equation, and then we are paying whatever cost is needed to demonstrate those next generation capabilities. The last thing I'll say is that if a team is trying to develop some new amazing capability and they're not getting the results they want, they don't want to wonder whether or not, if they're just throwing another 100 megawatts at the problem, whether they could have achieved that capability. So there's also that fear of missing out on technological advance that could have been driven by just a little bit more, well, maybe a lot more power.
All right, it's a beginning of a conversation we're going to keep on having so that we understand this all better, and I'm really grateful to you for joining us to get us started on that. Benjamin Lee is a professor in the Department of Electrical and Systems Engineering at the Department of Computer and Information Science at the University of Pennsylvania. I definitely have never read anybody's title like that on this show, so that's a first for us. We'll be right back. You're watching Velshi. The Senate in a few minutes is about to gavel into session as the longest ever government shutdown drags on. Senator Jeff Merkley will join me from Capitol Hill with the latest on the shutdown talks and why he believes the American Republic is in the most perilous moment since the Civil War. Plus, whenever you see images from war zones or dangerous storms or just scary places, it's because a journalist is documenting those moments so we can bear witness to them. The Pulitzer Prize-winning photojournalist Lindsay Addario is one of those dedicated people who puts her life on the line to make sure we can see what we would otherwise never understand. She joins me to share her stories and talk about the new National Geographic documentary that follows her journey capturing the Ukraine war. But first, how to tell the difference between the real takeaway from Tuesday's elections and the trap being set by Donald Trump and Republicans. Another hour of Velshi begins after the break.